The summer sun hung mercilessly over the small frontier town of Dry Creek, baking the dust into a blinding haze that shimmered above the ground. The townsfolk gathered near the trading post, murmuring and shifting uncomfortably as a wooden platform creaked under the weight of a woman, standing bound in the middle. Her dress was torn but once fine, her wrists tied in rough hemp rope, her face streaked with dust yet carrying the quiet dignity of someone who refused to bow to despair. Her name was Eliza Kane, a rancher's widow whose land had been swallowed by debt and deceit. When her husband died in a stampede to winters past, she'd been left to fend for herself, and men with cruel smiles took advantage of her misfortune. Now she stood on the auction block not as a criminal, but as property, another victim of the lawless greed that ruled the frontier. The sheriff barked out, "One last chance, folks. A good worker, fine spirit, and knows her way round a farm. Who'll start the bidding?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, but few dared to look her in the eyes. At the edge of the crowd stood Colt Harding, a cowboy with dust on his boots and an ache in his soul. He had been riding cattle trails for years, saving what little he could, but never quite enough to buy peace for himself. He didn't know Eliza, but when he saw her standing there, trembling yet proud, something deep inside him stirred a memory of his mother, sold off by her own kin when life turned cruel. His jaw tightened. He pushed forward, ignoring the snickers and whispers, his boots thudding against the dry earth. $2, he said, his voice low but steady. The sheriff raised a brow. $2? She's worth more than that. Boy, a ranch hand jeered. Ain't you got anything else to gamble with? Cowboy. Colt reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather pouch, the jingling sound of coins echoing like thunder in the uneasy silence. That's all I got, he said quietly. Every cent I've earned since the snows. The crowd hushed. Eliza's eyes flicked toward him, a flash of disbelief, and something softer hidden behind the fear. Sold, the sheriff barked, slamming his gavel down. The crowd muttered as Colt climbed the steps and pulled a knife from his belt, cutting the ropes from her wrists. For a moment, she didn't move, just stared at him as if trying to understand what kind of man would spend everything he had on a stranger. You're free now, ma'am, Colt said gently, lowering his gaze. She rubbed her wrists, the rope burns angry and red, then whispered, "Why would you do that?" Colt took a deep breath and answered, "Because no one deserves chains in a land that calls itself free." The words hit her like a gust of wind through dry grass, unexpected and alive. Without another word, he offered her his hand and led her off the block, the murmurs of the crowd fading behind them as they walked toward the open plains. The sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across the dirt, and though Colt had nothing left in his pockets, for the first time in years, he felt rich. As the two rode out of Dry Creek, silence stretched between them like a fragile bridge. The desert wind tugged at her hair, and the warmth of freedom felt strange against her skin. Finally, Eliza spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You gave up everything for me. What'll you do now?" Colt smiled faintly, his eyes on the horizon. "Start over, I reckon. Maybe this time, I won't have to do it alone." She looked at him for a long moment, the corners of her mouth trembling, then turned her face to the setting sun. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt hope stir again, raw, real, and wild as the western wind. The morning broke soft and gold across the open plains, where Eliza and Colt had made camp beneath a cluster of juniper trees. The fire crackled low, its smoke curling into the sky like a whisper of peace, and for a moment, the world seemed almost kind again. Colt stirred the embers with a stick, his face still rough with sleep, while Eliza sat nearby, her hands folded in her lap. The rope burns on her wrists were fading now, replaced by a quiet strength that ran deeper than scars. She had been bought like a thing but treated like a person, and that simple difference had begun to change her in ways she couldn't yet name. When Colt looked over at her and smiled faintly, she found herself smiling back, though she quickly turned away. Not ready to show the storm brewing inside her chest, they rode west for 2 days, following the river toward the foothills where Colt had once worked for a cattle rancher named Dunn. He hoped to find a new start there, maybe even a job for them both. But the land was still ruled by men who remembered debts and grudges. On the third day, as they approached an old rail crossing, 3 riders appeared out of the dust. The man in the lead wore a long coat and a cruel grin. Sheriff Cal Grady, the same man who had sold Eliza on the block. "Well, look what the wind dragged back," Grady sneered. "You think you can just buy freedom, Harding? That woman's still under the law." Colt's hand went to his revolver, slow and steady. "Law," he said with a grim smile. "You call it law when you sell folks like cattle." The sheriff's grin faltered, but his men didn't hesitate. They drew their guns, and for a heartbeat, the desert held its breath. Eliza moved before anyone expected. She snatched Colt's rifle from the saddle and leveled it at the sheriff with a steadiness that silenced even the wind. "You'll put that badge down," she said, her voice low and trembling not with fear, but fury. "You took everything from me once. You won't take it again." The sheriff's eyes widened as Colt stepped beside her, both of them standing shoulder to shoulder, the rising sun burning at their backs. It was a picture of defiance the West rarely saw a man and woman bound not by rope, but by courage. The standoff broke in a flash. A single shot cracked the air, then another. When the smoke cleared, the sheriff and his men were gone, spurred away into the hills, leaving only dust and silence behind. Colt turned to Eliza, his face caught between pride and disbelief. "Didn't reckon you'd take to my rifle that quick," he said softly. She lowered the gun, her hands shaking now that it was over. "Didn't reckon I'd need to," she whispered. He chuckled quietly, the sound rough but warm. "Guess freedom makes folks stronger than fear ever did." They packed their things and rode on, the river glinting beside them like a silver promise. That night, they reached a small valley where the grass grew high and green, and the stars hung low enough to touch. Colt dismounted, scanning the horizon, then turned to her. "This land's clean," he said. "No fences, no masters. We could start something here, Eliza." She looked out over the valley, her eyes wet with the kind of tears that come when a heart finally believes it deserves peace. In time, word spread through the frontier of a woman once bound and a cowboy who gave up every coin. He had to free her. Folks said they built a small ranch near the river where anyone down on their luck could find work, food, or just a bit of mercy. No one who came there left empty-handed, and no one who left forgot their kindness. They called it Freedom's Crossing, and even after the years passed, the tale of Eliza and Colt lived on, not as a love story alone, but as proof that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stand beside another and say, "You're not alone anymore." If this story touched your heart, ride with us again by subscribing to Old West Story, where the courage, kindness, and untold legends of the frontier still ride strong across time.